My name is Scott Wright. I'm the CEO at Angus Australia, and it's a privilege to put on another one of our Angus seminars, which are always well received. And again, we've sold out today, which is great. Again, for those just coming in the back, there's plenty of seats down the front, a couple of rows here. I'd just like to, on behalf of the board of Angus Australia, thank you for your great support. We have our president, Erica Halliday, here up the back, so great that Erica is with us. And special mention to Darryl Wilkes from International Angus in the US. We've been doing a project with Darryl and his organisation, and great that you could come out to Beef Australia and be here with us this afternoon. We at Angus Australia have had a long-standing project in the north, which many of you will be very aware of. Our new mission statement at Angus Australia is Angus for every system. And what we try to encapsulate with that is that we believe that Angus has a role to play in every beef producing system in Australia to increase profitability, whether that's the centre of Australia, whether that's northern Queensland, or whether that's perhaps the beef and dairy sector. So this seminar today, Breeding for Profitability in Northern Australia, is a very important part of that. We've just formed a new consultative committee for our work in the north, and our new chair of that will be Tim Vincent, who's here today as well. So we're looking forward to on the 18th of June to kick that new work off. So without any further ado, I'd just like to, I've got three really good speakers this afternoon. The first is Ian McLean. He's been a great supporter of Angus Australia, very willing to always get in and help us, and I think it was a couple of years ago that we had a producer, Warren, and we had a speaker pull out at the last minute. He's very willing to jump in the car and drive quite a way to come and give really good insight. So always very helpful. Some of the reports and the work that he's done in profitability in the north are excellent. He has a long history. He is the principal of Bush AgriBusiness, and prior to starting Bush AgriBusiness, Ian worked for the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association, particularly in member services and project management, and later as the executive officer. The Northern Territory DPI, he worked there in training and extension, and with Deloitte as an audit analyst, and has done a lot of station work in Queensland and the Northern Territory. He has an MBA and is accredited as a chartered agriculturalist by the Ag Institute of Australia. So I'd like to welcome you on stage. Thanks for being here, Ian, to give us our first talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon all. Very good to be here, and Angus Australia has asked me to come and talk about some work we did on them, a research project looking at influence of introducing genetics across the system. Before we get into that, I just want to talk a bit about what separates the top performers in the north. So we're going to talk about driving profitability and driving productivity. I think it's important to understand what the things that really drive that are, what separates the top performers, what drives profit in the north, talk a bit about genetics versus management, and look at the research we did into introducing Angus into commercial herds. So to start off with what separates top performers, we're pretty fortunate to work with a lot of beef businesses across Northern Australia, do a lot of benchmarking, and what we do is we line all the businesses up once we've analysed them based on profitability, the ones that are performing really well up here and coming down in profitability down this way. We spend a fair bit of time looking at these ones up here, trying to understand what it is that they're doing that separates them from the rest, that we can learn from and that the industry can learn from. And when we do that, it's the same things that keep rising to the top on that. Whether it's for family businesses or pastoral company businesses, the same things keep rising up in those enterprises that separate them and put them up this end of the field. I'll just go through them here. Consistent across all data sets, like I said, we've got more productive herds. So herd productivity, they're more efficient at turning grass into beef. Is the crux of it. That's a pretty key part of what you will do. And that means they generate more income per animal unit, or more income for every unit of grass that they eat effectively. They've better targeted herd expenditure. They actually spend less on their herd in direct costs or variable costs than the average, but they get more back in kilos. And that tells us not that they're just being tight and not spending the money, but if they're going to put their hand in their pocket, they're pulling it out where they can get $2, $3, $4 worth of benefit, or otherwise they're not putting it in their pocket. They're not putting their hand in their pocket there. But better labour efficiency, so they use labour better in the business. Better labour efficiency lowers the overhead costs per animal unit. And those three there are achieved independent of scale. Any size business can address them, and that's important. That helps smaller businesses punch above their weight, which we do see. But scale does come into it. Generally, the better performing businesses have more operating scale, or sufficient operating scale, which is 3,000 to 5,000 head is really what's needed to have sufficient economies of scale. And these top performing businesses, not just scale, they get those things we call operating efficiency right as well. And that all combines to a lower cost of production, which I'll talk about a bit more. They're the things we can quantify. There's a fair bit also that we can't quantify that comes in, which we call the attitudinal factors. These top performers here, generally, they want to know how they're performing. They're hungry for that information. They want to know the latest science, what they can apply, is it proven, put it in practice. They're very hungry for information and knowledge. Generally, they're not sitting back thinking they know it all, this is how granddad did it. They want to know how they can improve and are modern business managers, effectively. Good, well-developed critical thinking skills, which are important in life and in business, and they can smell bullshit from a long way off, which is important, particularly during beef week. They match stocking rate to carrying capacity, however that's best done for their system. Manage for stability rather than volatility. Try and have even performance each year. What we've found in our data, that stability really conspires against profitability. Businesses that are more stable, year to year, generally have better long-term performance. They use genetics to leverage good management, help them get ahead in that regard, and also manage risk, climate, price, risk as well. And we bundle that up into what we call intellectual capital. And that's pretty important, and something I think is important to remember is that there's a lot of intellectual capital in the industry. There'll be a lot in this room. A lot that producers have figured out in their businesses and put into practice, or managers in those businesses. And a lot of what we do is just going around learning from them and come and parrot it here. But there is a lot of intellectual capital in the industry, and that is really important to understand that. A lot of people out there doing very good work. So what drives profit? Just to bring it together a bit and link it to genetics. A bit crowded here, but I just want to go through it. We start with EBIT, which is earnings before interest and tax, or operating profit. Don't have a lot of graphs on for you about it. Profit per animal unit. We start there, that's what we want to do. We want to maximise profit per animal unit. The northern systems, in the south you can look at per hectare, but northern systems, it's all about that profit per animal unit. Function of income less costs. We've got income highlighted there. This income's the more important one. When we line all these businesses up, these ones here, they've got a competitive cost base, but there's ones back here with lower costs. Low costs isn't the way to profit. You need a competitive cost base. If your costs are too high, that'll conspire against profit. But these ones here generally all have higher income. And they don't get that through price received. Kilos of beef per year, which is the one I mentioned before. How good are they at turning grass into beef? And then price received. Price received is very important year to year. You've all seen that in the last few years, and you're going to see it this year, the impact of that price received on the bottom line. When the market's up, all ships are up, and vice versa. But when we look at the long-term data, these ones here, there's no difference in price between them and the average. It's all about that productivity and the efficiency of production, what they're doing here, there. So that's the kilos of beef per year. For breeding businesses, reproductive rate, mortality rate, and sale weight. That explains nearly all the difference between businesses. Those factors there. If you focus on them, you'll increase your ability to turn grass into beef, which will drive income, which will drive profit. We find reproductive rate is generally about twice as important as the others there. For growing or trading businesses, it's ADG, but also growth, average weight, and the mortality rate. Come down to expenses. Expenses are important. Like I said, these ones here do have a competitive cost base. It's not high, it's not necessarily the lowest. With regard to overheads, scale's a big driver there. You're running depending on where you are, that 2 fewer animals, each animal costs a lot to run, so those fixed costs, you don't have enough to spread that over. So that's an important part of knowing where you are for that. And labour efficiency is the other big one. How efficient do you use labour? Are you more than 1,500 AE for every full-time equivalent? If you are, you're likely to have competitive labour. Enterprise expenses or direct or variable costs, as I said, the better performers target them better. Put their hand in their pocket there, they make sure it pays. I just want to put the cost of production up there as well, because everything that affects profit, except price received, influences cost of production. So that's why it's such an important reason, particularly the last few years. We've seen the beef market up, which has been excellent, and good profits in the industry, which is excellent. It's important to look through that cost of production just to see how the underlying business is going through that there. So that's a key measure there. But that's a bit heavy, but I just want to give that context to really highlight the point that fertility drives herd productivity, that conversion of grass into beef. That productivity drives income in the business through the full market cycle, and that income drives profit. A lot of other things in there, as we saw, but this is the key line, I think, for everyone to understand. Then there's the question which comes up, which is more important, management or genetics. By management, we're talking about how well they run the business, not necessarily who's there, what systems they match stock and rate carrying capacity, target herd expenditure and labour efficiency, etc. So I'm going to quote Phil Holmes here, just going to take the word. In the beef report we did in 2017, the first beef report, had some good words there, so just copied them. Where it says, management is paramount. Genetics alone cannot save a poor-performing business, but genetics is a really powerful lever which can enhance good management at low cost, and it would be a travesty to leave that unused, which I think is very important. So we do talk about that. We'll sort of move on now. The Angus Australia report, Scott and his team, talking a few years ago, said, well, what you look, here's the industry data we've got, the understanding we've got, and say, what if these genetics were introduced? What difference does that make? So we've got Dr. Michael Wellington, who's on our team. He can't be here, unfortunately, so I'll talk about this. We'll look into it. What Michael did was got beef report data, general industry data, good data Angus has got on their genetics and their genetic trends over time. Auctions plus pricing data, what the actual premium achieved for Angus genetics is. And put that on to ask, well, what's the benefit from introducing Angus genetics? Where does that benefit come from? Is it from the price premium, or is it from the genetics improving productivity? So have a look at that. And what we did was have a look at 3 regions: central western Queensland, which is chartable through Longreach; southern inland Queensland, which is Roma through to Central Highlands, and New South Wales tablelands as well. 3 regions data from the Australian Beef Report, and had a look at 4 different enterprise types there: breeding to sell weaners, breeding to sell feeders, breeding to sell slaughter cattle, and trading. Then we have a look at 3 breed types: pure Angus, Angus Brahman in the northern regions, and Angus Hereford in the New South Wales region there. And modelled these, I'll just go through and show the results here. So what we've got, and there's reports available on the Angus Australia website for more detail in there. We've got the present value here of the different options for the different regions. So firstly, there's a positive present value for all of them. So we're going to look at the costs and benefits, bring that back to today's dollars. Positive present value across all, but quite a difference there. The weaner operation came out at the bottom across all regions, so southern inland Queensland, central western Queensland, and New South Wales tablelands. Weaner came out the middle, which is what we generally see. All the grass and dollars that are going to be produced in this calf, you sell it as a weaner, you're selling it before it's realised its growth potential. These other options, reasonably consistent, what comes out a little bit higher. And the breakup of the benefit we've got there is the present value from kilos of beef raised in the genetics in the blue, from the price received in the green, and heterosis or hybrid bigger in the red. What we see there is that cross at F1, it's a really big benefit in there from that heterosis. that hybrid bigger, which is quite important. And the price premium is the icing on the cake. It's important that it is there, but more benefit comes from the kilos, from the genetics, but also the heterosis and the price received. It's icing on the cake, which is what we usually see. So, key findings from that work were that productivity benefits outweigh the price premiums. Like I said, icing on the cake, and that's usually the case. For all premium markets, you need a good efficient production system with a low cost of production, then market premiums can leverage that. If you've got an inefficient business chasing market premiums, that's probably not going to fix things. And a significant proportion of that productivity benefit was due to heterosis. So that's going to be a challenge for management, how to maintain that ongoing heterosis over time. But that is a big benefit there, and will be a challenge for management to maintain that. And I won't get too far into it, just in researching for this, looked at some work which is 30 years old, but still current, which did look at G by E interaction in the north, of Brahmins and Boss Taurus, not Angus in this case. And what they found there is that looking at the productivity levels on the vertical axis and the level of environmental stress on the bottom axis, and what it's found is the more stress that is put on animals, the poorer they perform, obviously. At very high stress, the Brahmins perform well in the north, but across the full range, it's that F1 with the hybrid figure that performs the best overall, which reiterates the findings from Michael in the work we did here. Back to the key findings. The results are very sensitive to additional expenses. So we've assumed that the bulls could be bought for the same price and the same longevity. If you go out and spend a lot more on bulls, this applies across any breed, or they have higher turnover, then that's going to add to the cost and take all that benefit out of it. So the price paid for bulls and how long they last has a big impact on the sums. So you need to take that into account. The real big one here is the rate of genetic change of the seed stock source has a big influence. We look at this over time, so it's not just looking at genetics now. We have to look at where are the genetics going over time. This is where the breed plan data really comes through, and that has a big impact, which I'll show here. So how we look at it is, if you're a commercial breeder looking for a bull source, finding which seed stock supplier is making good, consistent advances year on year is very important, because then you can effectively hitch your wagon to their business and you get pulled along with their genetic game. You continually getting the genetics in, and they're better each year, that's going to improve the business, which we saw here. So here we've got the Angus indices, which a lot of you will be familiar with, just graphed over time. The last 10 years there, and what that's showing is that there's a greater than 3% compounding return in those indices year on year. So the Angus breed average, if you're just going out and buying breed average bulls, and it's the average each year, and they're getting 3% better each year. That's where a lot of that benefit over time comes from. That applies across all breeds, having that genetic source that's making gains year on year. So within that also comes to looking at what the breed as a whole, but also studs within the breed. So what we did last year was put together some work on trying to identify the top studs across the industry, those that were indexing well, were making gains, and got permission to show the Rennie Lee data here from that. What we see here is the Angus average. We've got the Angus breeding index here, it's the same across all indices. And we see Rennie Lee's average there, above the breed average, a similar trajectory. Making gains each year above the breed average. That's what you want to look for in your bull source. That has a big impact over time. So that's the index, the weighted average of the genetic merit, which is a very useful number. And then we've got the genetic profile here. Rennie Lee, this is their 21 drop data. We're working on the 22 drop data at the moment. For the average of all animals registered, we can see there that's quite an impressive profile. Everything on the right hand side except net feed intake, which selecting just the net feed intake and the detrimental overall productivity, which is another subject there. So quite an impressive profile, but just the point is, in choosing genetics, it's making sure they are going in the right direction, have a profile that's going to work your production system is the key thing there. So in summary, herd productivity drives income, income drives profit. The top performers have more productive herds, target their expenditure better, and better labour efficiency and more scale. Management is more important than genetics, but genetics can really leverage good management. Introducing Angus genetics provides financial benefits to commercial herds across the board from, as we saw, not just the price premium, but the productivity, the heterosis, and the genetic change over time. The productivity benefits outweigh the price premium. Heterosis is important, but like anything, you can't spend more, too much on it, or you erode all the financial gains. And make sure you get the right seed stock source. Thank you, Scott. Happy to take any questions there. Leave it at the end? That's fine. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. The next speaker this afternoon that we have is Mr. Ben Noller, the General Manager of Palgrove Pastoral. Ben is the General Manager of what is really one of the largest ultra-black and Charolais studs in Australia. He's been with Palgrove for 7 years, following a transition of that company from a family operation to a corporate enterprise. Ben has had a lifetime involvement in the seed stock industry, seen him working through many breeds, and has many strong industry mentors, which equip Ben with the skills to push Palgrove forward. Ben manages the seed stock enterprise for Palgrove and has a herd of 6,500 plus registered cattle, and ensures that Palgrove's genetic performance remains at the forefront of the industry. His focus remains on producing genetics that improve the profitability for commercial producers. So welcome to the stage.
Scott, I stole a little bit in my intro, but thank you. So thank you, Scott, and thank you to the Angus Association for the invitation to speak here today. For me, it's certainly humbling being up on stage with the likes of Troy and Ian and sharing our story about how Angus genetics are used within our Ultra Black program. And as you'll see, the majority of our Ultra Black program is heading into Northern Australia. Just a little bit of background quickly from myself. Basically grew up on a family farm north of Oakey in southeast Queensland, had a Charolais stud growing up. And I guess I was very fortunate to have a father that was heavily involved within the Charolais breed and also the wider beef industry throughout that time. And certainly equipped me with the skill set that, you know, and the basics of constitution and structural correctness and breeding cattle that certainly I've taken on with me now. Our family created an interbreed champion here back in 1997, and that was going to be Red Baron. And ironically, that bull actually sold a half share to Palgrove at that time, which is now the company that I get to manage. I certainly have many vivid memories from the farm. Training endurance also, used to train for, you know, riding 20 to 80 kilometres a week, and I guess my childhood dream was always to operate a large-scale seed stock business of a number of breeds and distributing bulls throughout the country, and also having a commercial business on the side of that to verify those genetics back through that commercial business. And I guess I'm very fortunate now that I get to live out that childhood dream with what I do at Palgrove now. For those that don't know, so Palgrove basically operates properties in southern Queensland and northern New South Wales, our bull depot at Drillham in Queensland, and also our selling complex at Chinchilla. All of our other properties are basically breeding properties, and we run a 50-50 stud and commercial herd on those properties. And as Scott mentioned, we run 6,500 registered breeders throughout that operation through the Charolais, Ultra Black, Angus, and Angus breed. So basically today I'm just going to share a bit of our past with how we developed our Ultra Black program, some of the things we come across along the way, and how we got to where we are now. And then I'll just share a bit of the growth on the present, on where we're at within the Ultra Black breed and the growth we've seen with that and how we use those Angus genetics to fold in amongst our Ultra Black program. And then basically the future, probably the most exciting part of the presentation, I believe, is some of the things coming up in the future of the Ultra Black breed, those Angus genetics in Northern Australia. So basically, our past, so Palgrove's been operating for 55 years and, as I mentioned, predominantly been a Charolais business throughout that time. There were, in the early days, selling Charolais bulls and also Charolais Angus and Charolais Shorthorn bulls. But for the last 15 years, basically been operating the Ultra Black program since 2019. Just to put a few things into perspective for a few numbers I'll mention in the next section to highlight some of that growth. Basically in 2015, we were selling, like Charolais were making up 60 to 70% of our business. And at that time, we were selling about 180 Ultra Black Angus and Brangus bulls throughout that time. Our first auction for Ultra Black bulls was held in 2013, where we offered 18 Ultra Black bulls in that sale. And 2018 probably marked a big, significant point within the growth phase of the Ultra Black program, where Palgrove was a long-term strategy for us to really bolster that program, and we purchased new assets and also went and purchased a number of Angus females to really bolster our Ultra Black program at that time in 2018. So it was quite a significant year of growth in the programs. So basically the reasons why for the Ultra Black program, there's a few reasons in around that. Basically, there was probably a limit around how many Charolais bulls we could distribute, and with the skill set in the business and wanting to sell more bulls, there was a need for another breed. The other one was basically through client demand, a lot of clients using Charolais bulls over heavy high boss Indicus cattle, straight Brahman cattle, and looking for a third breed to put over and into that cross. Another reason, I guess, during that time, there's a lot of market demand for increased carcass quality traits. We felt the Ultra Blacks could certainly add to that. And also industry during that time in Northern Australia, a big push for those fertility traits. So for those that don't know, like an Ultra Black in terms of definition is basically made up of 8 to 25% Brahman content, and we'll flip it around the other way, about 75 to 92% Angus content. And I guess how did we get to that? In the beginning, it was basically combining high accuracy Angus and Brangus genetics from both the Australian population and also the US population to formulate our Ultra Blacks, which basically in our program we aim to hit around the 80% Angus content and 20% Brahman content. Obviously it depends a little bit on the makeup of the Brangus animals you're combining in, but it's a little percent each way in our program. But for simplicity, we'll say 80%, 20%. And basically, once we get to that 80%, 20% within our program, we then join Ultra Black to Ultra Black. But because we're still doing that, we've been doing that for 13 years now, we're still folding in Angus and Brangus genetics within that program. So basically some of the challenges along the way, or what the aim was basically to have enough Bos Indicus content within those animals that they would provide that heat tolerance or thermoregulation within those tougher environments and that tropical adaptation. Yet we still wanted to produce cattle that will grow, grade and yield. And I guess our client base was sending into a number of different markets, that either the majority would be into the southern feedlots, but had a number of grass producers and also a number of our clients at scale in Western Queensland in the organic space as well, which was really important. So basically, we knew what we wanted to develop. We wanted the 80% Angus content, 20% Brahman. We knew that was doable because we had these animals already in our program and at reasonable scale, and they were performing well for us. But I guess the next step was basically doing this at scale with more producers in Northern Australia to verify that they could do it in those tougher environments. So basically, where we are at present, I just thought I'd start with our mission, since Scott started with the mission this morning. basically, I just want to highlight 4 things within this mission that I believe are important for profitability in Northern Australia, but also make a big part of 4 key things within our program. And I wish I could read a bit easier, but I can see that screen, can't see that one very well. So we provide superior wealth research, high performance genetics backed by science and data that consistently improve performance / profitability. And then to skip down to the ones highlighted in red there, our purpose is to breed adaptable, functional cattle that increase fertility and achieve higher compliance rates. So to me, they are 4 key things within our Ultra Black program and our entire breeding program that we really focus on. So basically the next slide, if we look at this map here, it's basically showing all of our clients across the country. So every one of those dots and the number under it is a client of ours or someone that has used Palgrove genetics across the country, across all breeds. If we look at the zoomed in map of Queensland there, and that red line that shoots across the map there basically is us standing here in Rockhampton and then shooting all the way across to the Western Australian border. Now if you thought of everything north of that basically makes up 70% of the number of bulls Palgrove distributes annually, and our main aim is to distribute 1,000 bulls annually. And then if you think back to those numbers I spoke before where Charolais were making up 60 to 70% of our business, they're now making up 35% of that, and then the Ultra Black Angus and Brangus bulls are now making up 65% of our total bull sales. And that's not that the Charolais have had a huge reduction. 2015-16 numbers I mentioned before were quite big years for the Charolais breed, but it's not that they've come back in numbers so much as the increase in numbers that we're seeing in that Ultra Black Angus and Brangus space. I put some average prices up there. I guess everyone likes to gloat about their 2022 sale average, and we may never see those again, but just to put the 10-year perspective, in 2013 when we sold 18 bulls at auction, and now in 2023 we're selling 19 bulls and Ultra Black and Brangus bulls and average just over 18,500. So basically our present is why are people buying these Ultra Black bulls? And I guess for me, it really is that balance between the maternal production and the terminal performance that people are receiving from these Ultra Black and Angus infused genetics in these tougher environments. And we had some data shared with us just before in terms of the #1 profit drives. And for me, maternal productivity is certainly key, particularly in Northern Australia. They've got to survive and thrive and reproduce in those environments, and that was a key focus for us in terms of developing the Ultra Blacks and having that hint of Bos Indicus. I'll just share a story with you on the fertility side of it from someone that's brand new. I think he was in the room. I actually had this in my presentation and then ran into him yesterday, and he said he was coming to the talk. So thanks, Nathan, if you're in the room. But basically, he's been running Ultra Black bulls in the program, a high Bos Indicus program for the last few years, and still has some high Bos Indicus bulls in that program. Had a drop of heifers come in, had a reasonable season, was joining those heifers up, so some Bos Indicus, some Ultra Black side, and knew there was probably some in there that were a little bit small and weren't at weight for joining, but for management purposes put them all out together to join. And coming back into the pre-test time, those Ultra Black side and Angus infused genetics in those cattle came in with an 80% pre-test compared to the higher Bos Indicus cattle with a 50% pre-test. All run under the same conditions and joined at the same time. So for me, that's a key driver. When we heard some of that data just before, it's a key driver. And that's not to be detrimental to the Bos Indicus side. I think the Bos Indicus is always going to play a key part in Northern Australia, but it's just how we can blend that through. And just an example of some of the environments some of these bulls are going into. The bigger picture there is of a Sam Molyneux at Raymore Station in Quilpie, so not quite as far north. And that's a 15-month-old Ultra Black bull in some of the environments that these bulls are working in. So I guess we've confirmed from some of these producers that the balance between that maternal production and that terminal performance they're getting out of these Angus influence animals is a key driver but they're from them for terms of profitability. And I guess it's not, we've confirmed that it's not just doable in these environments, it's actually been highly successful for a number of these guys. So for me, the future for Ultrablack and Angus infused genetics looks quite bright. We're actually seeing the Ultrablack shown in their own right out in Centre Ring, actually probably nearly right about now, in 20 minutes time. So for me, they're being recognised in their own right in Centre Ring here at Beef Australia. Another key one and an example of this is that Angus Australia has actually now got an Ultrablack register within there, and the key driver behind that was Angus members wanting to register animals with higher Angus content, and that was the main thing, and they've got a lot more registrations coming through in that register because they see the advantage of those higher Angus content influenced animals in Northern Australia. Another probably really exciting thing for me, and it's I guess all of our animals are registered through the Angus multi-breed register and have been for forever. Since we started, and the key thing with that for us was we just didn't really have that robust genetic analysis to really push us forward. And so it's been a quest of mine and Christian. I don't think Christian's in the room. I think you left him on the stand, didn't you? I know he's up there. You let him in. And certainly Christian, and I appreciate the help from you and Angus Australia and the real progressive approach to help us out in this quest to find a genetic analysis that allows us a bit more robust to make some breeding decisions and also some better breeding decisions for our clients. And that is that we've now can announce that Angus Australia has initiated a new genetic analysis that will be run through the International Angus Breeders Association. So, and welcome and thank Dr. Wilkes for all the work he's done with those guys on that as well. And for me, it's a really exciting step forward for not only Palgrove and us to make genetic decisions in our clients, but also for anyone else out there that wants to come on the journey and I guess improve profitability and more Angus genetics in Northern Australia. Just wanted to share this one, and this is direct from Dr. Wilkes, travelling to America and talking to a lot of those guys over there, and they certainly have a very progressive bunch when it comes to collecting data and information and measuring what they do. But basically, this is an illustration that shows how the selection within the Angus herd over there through adding in Angus and Ultrablack genetics and selecting for traits like age of puberty and sheath design and more IMF and those type of things has basically changed their cattle, not only phenotypically, but actually at the DNA level. And what we're looking at there is the number 4 chromosome, and the number 4 chromosome contains the leptin gene, and that leptin gene, it can be associated with marbling, fat thickness, ribeye area, feed intake in beef breeds, and also the onset of puberty. So, and when you look at the modern day Angus or Ultrablack in America, basically the average breed content there is 72% Angus. Yet when we look at the leptin gene, it's actually 90.4% Angus DNA within that gene. So it's just an illustration to show how they've adapted that through that selection. So basically, for me, the future, that's my 4-year-old son Ted, loves bulls, cows, or anything outdoor. But so for me, we're all passionate beef breeders in this room that I guess we wouldn't be here if we weren't. And ultimately, our main aim is to improve profitability for future generations of beef producers. And I wrote 3 words up on there: grow, improve, and measure. And I guess for me, you can't grow anything without improving it, and you can't improve something unless you're measuring it. And so we've already seen through some slides here and through what we're hearing from our clients that Angus influence animals are improving profitability in Northern Australia already. It's just a matter of how much more that can happen. So I guess the takeaway for you is, I suppose, what balance works for you in your programs, depending on where you are in environments, to what balance works for you to achieve that maternal productivity and internal performance in balance to drive that profitability. Thank you.
speaker this afternoon is Mr. Troy Setter, the CEO and the Director of the Consolidated Pastoral Company. Welcome, Troy. He is well renowned through the beef industry, both in Australia and Indonesia. Troy currently also chairs the board of Noller, the Council of Research and Development Corporations, as the Director of Live Corp, and is a former chair of the Australian Beef Industry Foundation and several other organisations. Along with having a degree in rural science from the University of New England, he has also completed the agribusiness program at Harvard Business School and the Australian Rural Leadership Program. Troy has worked across the agribusiness industry in production through processing and marketing for beef, sheep, grains, cotton, land development and logistics. He was the previous Chief Operating Officer of the Australian Agricultural Company and has held several key executive positions within agribusiness, including the Northen Australian Cattle Company, Torrens Investments, Kalara and the Twynon Group. So welcome this afternoon, Troy.
And share those with you, and more than happy to take questions and challenges at the end by any means. And yeah, look, I'm going to put up a bit of data comparing a few breeds. So is there anyone here from any of the tropical breed societies? Very good. So CPC, so we're originally the Packer family, some ag investment and land investment. Went through some ownership of private equity for a few years, and now sit in a family office with the Hands family, and then also our management team across the group has got equity in the group as well, which is really good. And for us, we're in Northern Australia. We've bought and sold properties over a variety of time, and we've got some properties, I suppose, that are pretty high rainfall in the high rainfall belt across Northern Australia. Fair to say that we're probably more of a property developer over time, and we've sort of got the portfolio that was left after we've traded and broken the company up a few times and had a few journeys. But we've got about 4 million-ish hectares across Northern Australia and down into central Queensland, 2 feedlots in Indonesia. We've got a really energetic young team, particularly in Indonesia. We've got about 600 people as part of the team in Indonesia. The biggest part of our team is actually Muslim. In Australia, about 51% female across the whole business, and we've got about 15 to 20,000 hectares of cropping now, and a few biodiversity projects as well, and carbon projects, which I'll touch on. So I suppose just to step back just a little bit, and it's a lovely photo that gets used a lot by various genetics things, and this was a photo of our Brahman stud, probably about 15 years ago. There's probably about a calf ratio of about 20% there. So I love it every time that it's in Beef Central and it leads up with a genetics review, and I'm just so embarrassed by that photo. And also it was sort of 10 years ago I started CPC, and sort of, oh my God, look at these great big fat cows and not having a calf. And that's not a shot at the Brahmins, it's just where we bred. We had a really terminal Charolais program, and we had quite a terminal Angus program in central Queensland as well. We thought we were running a maternal program, but we weren't buying a bull under sort of 11 or 1,200 kilos. And if we sat back and look at Northern Australia, where our markets are, we put a 300 to 400 kilo feeder steer on a ship. Those cattle are taken out to sort of mid 500 kilos in Southeast Asia. If we're supplying feedlots in Australia, those grain-fed animals are taken out to 500 to 600 kilos live weight, and our slaughter cattle and cull cows really, 500 kilos is a pretty big animal. So look at Northern Australia when we started this program, predominantly uncontrolled joining, a lot of lactational and estrus. We had to wean just about all our cows to get them to cycle again. It meant that they were out of season, doing a lot of pregnancy testing, synchronisation. We had really low branding rates, genetic gain was lower than CPI, and disease was a big issue, and really basic disease, and a lot of basic disease issues are still in Northern Australia. 30% of producers in Northern Australia don't vaccinate for botulism, probably only half vaccinate for Vibrio. So if you look back to where we started, we looked at the beef situation analysis, and Ian had touched on this, that the average herd in Northern Australia had a profit of about $6 per animal equivalent, and the top performers were at about 60 something. So we wanted to be in that top performing group, and we needed to be, or within about 12 months well within make payroll. So it was important to get in early and make some change. Well, not get in early, just get in and make some changes. But we used a bit of data from the NT Department of Primary Industries, which was really good. And this, I suppose, summed up that the heavier the heifer is in Northern Australia, the higher the pregnancy rate. Well, we looked at that and went, okay, we've been chasing that. We've been breeding bigger, heavier, later maturing heifers, rather than looking for the ones at the bottom and trying to find the heifers that actually breed at a lighter, younger, earlier weight and move to that. So the bull does our first selection pretty well, apart from, we pull out their noses and twisted legs and things like that, which we get a few of. But we're really trying to let the bull do the first selection. So pretty much anything over about 240 kilos in November gets a bull with it on most of the stations. And then the first calf breeding rate is really driven by weight again, but finding those ones at the lower end was really important for us, and not just chasing weight and later maturity, later puberty, because we really saw in Northern Australia that we're challenged by some really big strong wet and dry cycles. So we get pretty much all of our rain over 2.5 to 3 months on a lot of the stations, and then it's dry for the rest of the year. And then if you get a fire, you can lose all your sort of haystack out in the paddock pretty quickly. We have really low quality soils for nitrogen and phosphorus, and that's a big challenge. We're really selling the north well. But that country's 10% or even less in value than a lot of great producing areas in southern Australia, and it works well for us. But I think what really hit home here is we wean at about 180 kilograms normally. We actually wean a lot lower now as a company and then feed those calves. We don't need to confuse that today. But if your animals aren't cycling and getting in calf until they're about 400 kilos, and on a heifer, you're lucky to be getting a calf by the time they're 3 years of age in Northern Australia. And I think if you look at the Angus breed, people say, well, my cattle get in calf at 12 months of age, but are they 400 kilo, 450 kilo heifers at 12 months of age? Because if they are, they're not suited for our market. They're absolutely suited for lots of parts of Australia. When I talk to a lot of Angus breeders, they say, well, my heifer's getting calf as a 12-month-old. So that's great. That's a real, we've all got to be doing that. But if that weight is into the 400 kilos, they're not going to be suited for Northern Australia. They're going to be suited for Southern Australia. So you need those females that are a pain in the neck and start getting in calf when you're pulling them off mum if you want to get fertility in Northern Australia. So we want young, fast puberty and young growth. We put the economics on this a few years ago. Calf was a 3-year-old, we'd lose about $205. The calf was a 2-year-old, there's about $30 left, turning that animal off out as a weaner. So getting heifers that are calving young is fast as good for us. So we ran all our data, and what was better in terms of weight gain and increased calving, and fertility just beats weight gain. But we actually want both, and I'll come back to that. So we want lots of fertility, but we want fast young growth and moderate our size in our business. We looked at what the cost of a colour cow was for CPC. There's an opportunity cost, which was really a cash cost of about $285 a year. What that said to us is we've got a fair bit of money we can spend on that cow, so we don't have to cull her as well. So we could afford to do all of the vaccines, Vibrio and things that we weren't doing. We can put a bit more phosphorus into those cows. We can put a bit more nitrogen into them. We can take time to wean that calf off them and spend a little bit of money, because it costs us so much money to cull a cow in North Australia and hang on to a heifer to get that heifer to grow. So we put a 350 kilo steer weight into, and what is that, and the extra time that it takes for us with OPEX and capital costs to turn off the steer. So this fast young growth was just so important to us. If we add an extra year, which is easy to do in Northern Australia, you're only adding sort of 120 to 180 kilos a year, averaging 150. If you have a bad yard experience, you have a wet season that's really wet like the one we've just had, you don't get phosphorus out, you have a lot of fires like we saw last year later in the year, and you don't have the pasture in front of them, it's very easy by the time they're 350 kilos of weight to add an extra whole year to their life. You get some compensatory gain, but as a business we wanted to take a year at least off our steer turn-off range. So we were not great in that steer. So yeah, fast young growth, but not necessarily bigger cattle, not linear growth cattle. So what does that look like at CBCs? We had a Brahman base that said we wanted to breed better Brahmans as well, so we selected really heavily on the Brahman base. And you'll see that in some of the data we improved the Brahmans, but to get the biggest improvement we needed to really embrace hybrid vigour. We put Baran in, which is a Kenyan tropical composite that came to Australia with Siro many years ago. Probably came at the same time, roughly as big limousines, big Charolais and big animals. Wasn't the right time. We got some genetics out of Kenya. They breed like rabbits. They're really fast young growth. They're used to, I don't know if anyone's worked with Barans, but because they've had lines around them for like hundreds and hundreds of years, the cows circle the calves a lot and they mob up. They're a bit like meerkats. There's always something out looking. And they have a really low tolerance for ears. So if you try and put them through the yard twice, they hate it, but that first time they're really good. Angus for predictability, performance, we had Angus, and we've been putting some Wagyu into some of the herds that have really bad fertility and really late maturing females to bring that rate of early puberty down. And then our composite actually has some polled Wagyu in there that most people would say is a pretty plain looking Angus, but the fertility is really good. The thing we found too was we looked at our kill data and our older cows that when we were culling on empty cows each year, the ones that had were 10 plus years of age, quite a few of them had a bit of IMF. We went through quite a bit of data and found that the cattle that are losing intramuscular fat and losing the positive rib and positive rump fat certainly don't go into lactational estrus as quick as the cows that are burning muscle. So it's part of it. So the IMF from the Wagyu is more about fertility and more about body condition maintenance, so they keep cycling, than it is about eating quality. Eating quality is a bonus. So we put that all together, and so internally we have an elite composite herd in just a couple of hundred k's west of here, and fully performance recorded, a couple of thousand cows, and then goes through 2 multiplier composite herds, and then out to our commercial herds, and then into our 2 feedlots, or to get feedback back from our customers. So I really wanted to cattle that matched our country. We were looking forward, I suppose, on markets as well. We have breeding properties in the north that come down into central Queensland. When cattle prices are difficult and demand from feedlots is lighter on, like it is at the moment. Brahman heifers are really hard to sell at the moment. You don't have a restocker market competing. You don't have breeders competing on them too much. The 2 big domestic supermarket chains don't buy them a lot, so getting that Angus genetics into them really helped us with more competitive market on our cull heifers when the price gets difficult. Improving carcass and higher vigour was really good. So through this program we run EBVs and we've got a single step test for the genomics that we run with ourselves and a couple other people and share and benchmark all of that data together like any stud would, and do a lot of performance reporting. We've got some cattle in green feeders this year. We've put a couple of hundred bulls in. Net feed conversion efficiency and emissions reduction is also something that we're looking for. So we're trying to get every animal on the right-hand side of the curve. There's not many of them out there, but there's a few, and trying to balance it up. I mean, you know all of that, but it's even harder for us because we're trying to pick a lot of tropical traits, which I'll come to that are more phenotypic. So I suppose just a few opportunities and things that have come through. So we moved from 3-year-old predominantly down to 2-year-old. Our 100% PDIC Brahman heifers, we got that first weaning weight up to 74%, which is pretty good, but that's 100% pregnant. We probably should only be losing about 15% calves. We had issues with the front teats, really getting big in Brahman cattle when the calf is first born. The calf can't suckle on that teat. Wagyu and Angus and Baran have been really good for fixing that up. God love it, some of those tropical cows, they hide their calf and they can't find them, or you're moving or dogs pick them off. And a lot of fertility in Northern Australia, through Northern Australia, is also controlling dogs in a pretty big way. And so if we go to our first calf control Brahman Angus across females now, getting about 92% weaning rate on that. So we wean and brand in the same hit, at 85% in the Brahmans. We hardly have any pure Brahman females, none left now. We've only got a couple of pure Brahman bulls as part of our crossbreeding. But then first calf heifer rebreed rate crossbreeds. Once you get the change in genetics on the mother's side, whether it's better tropical genetics but also with hybrid bigger, that heifer rebreed rate just exploded, as you can see there, from 45% with fertility selected tropical cattle versus 80% with the cross. And our Brangus weaners were 60 kilograms heavier than the Brahmans at the same age. So you're talking 120 versus 220 to 240. So there's some big benefits there. First round this year at our elite studs, this is performance herd of just a patch of 1,500 cows, the different performance of the breeds. I purposely haven't put up here some because I didn't want it to be taken out of context. We ran as a base population a couple of hundred pure Angus cows in the Northern Territory and some pure Brahman, and then the cross. The Angus cows didn't perform as well. They did it quite tough when you put the bull and the cow together, and then the next generation performed exceptionally well, and so didn't want to throw that up here. So these are some bulls that have got and cows have got probably half Angus, even that tiger stripe thing, and then some. And the reason he's up there is we don't really care about colour, and Wagyu and Baran is crossed across them. So in our feedlots in Indonesia, we ran the data last week for the last 2 years on the cattle we put through the feedlot. The Angus and Angus cross cattle had 18% higher ADG than all the other breed combinations, 10% more weight gain than all other breeds, and 8% less days on feed than other breed combinations. So that's a pretty material number for us across 75,000 head a year. 6% higher ADG than Brahmans, 7% more tropical weight gain, 7% less days on feed. So that was of our cattle up there. So that's some of our cattle in shed in Indonesia, and performing really well. I think if we look at what we want as a company for bulls in the north, the growth pattern is really important. Fast young growth, early puberty, early maturity, and cows that just don't keep on growing. Age is really important for bulls going north. We've tried young yearling bulls, taking them up north and letting them go so that they can have a year under their belt. Had some real issues with them growing out, not getting enough body condition on them. They want to work hard, and the next year they're really skinny. We expect you as stud breeders to have really tight control joining on your studs and cull, and the bulls only work for 6 to 12 weeks a year, depending on where you are. We take them up north, they've got to work for 52 weeks of the year, they've got to go hard, they've got to so that the further you take them, the harder they work, which is funny. You'd think it'd be the further south you go, the easier it is, the longer you put your bulls out for, but the north is really difficult. Body condition and positive fat, really, really important. Sheath's important, and so is prep use. So this is a bull that we bred, IVF calf, beautiful looking bull. He was 12 months of age there. We had quite a few like that. So he got a free trip to Indonesia at 12 months of age. That prep use hanging down like that's a big issue in Northern Australia. It's full of grass seeds, gets infected, and so we've done a lot of work with trying to identify and cull out the Angus lines that hang their prepuce out. I know it's hard, but it's a bit of a challenge. And then the same with the sheath angle. So even it's not so much just the long sheath bulls, it's also the bulls that are dead straight. They're really short but dead straight. Cross them with a Brahman, and you end up with a great pendulum like that. The feet's really important. You can see this bull here's got shocking feet. That really big front grown out feet. Feet can be a big challenge, but it's not as big a challenge probably as hair and bad structure and bad temperament for us. We're, as I said, working on feed conversion efficiency, working all year round. Walking ability, and it's not just walk with the cows and go through a muster, it's getting out and around the cattle all the time. Our water points are pretty close together, only 3 k's apart, but other people have them a lot further apart. But to get to yards, there's lots of 30 and 40 k walks sometimes. We do use more portable panels and portable yards now. We've put more of the Angus cattle in. We're having to take the yards to the cattle or put them into a lane and walk them. And foraging ability is something that's really important. For the bull to be able to walk and work its way out and also get out and forage, and that's one of the things we've been chewing around with as we do more feed conversion efficiency testing things. Do we take foraging ability away, or how do we naturally select for that? Sort of show you a few bulls. So these are out at Northen Park Station, which is northwest of Chillago. We actually moved a couple of your bulls band actually quite north in Queensland. So put another dot on your map probably. And really tested them up there. They did quite well. But up there, skin type is really important up there. Nothing worse than driving into a mob of cattle and your eyes are bleeding because they've been rubbing their eyes on trees. Fly bites and skin issues we're really ruthless on internally. Most of the bulls I was able to hide the brands, you can tell. So the bulls, this is about a k off the trough in the Northern Territory. The cattle really push out the first k or 2 of the trough, and then the grass is good. So in November, it gets really hot. The grass is really short. They've got to walk 2 or 3 k's out off the trough before they get into good feed. It's really hot, and it's the time we want them to be putting on to be performing and ready to go and work. And we've had a few issues with nitrogen and semen quality morphology that we're working through, but that natural selection has been really important to us. We've probably blown a fair few bulls doing it, but we're finding the ones that will naturally select. Hair's a big problem, so I won't say who we bought this bull off. We bought him as a young bull. He was described as slick, clean-coated, suitable for Northern Australia, and 3 years later he's still about the same weight as when we bought him. It's more that hair issue and that loss of trust, I suppose, with suppliers. So these cattle are slick, and I'm not saying that hairy cattle are a problem, they're just for the right place and the right market. So honesty is really important. We've been burnt a few times. The bulls just don't grow, they don't hit maturity, the ticks get into them, and they get really chewed up. So I suppose marketing is an issue for. It's not just about dropping bulls up into Northern Australia and selling bulls into Northern Australia as an Angus breed or as a softer breed, in my view. There's a lot of work still to be done. If you look at Indonesia for live cattle, Vietnam for live cattle, Middle East, they're used to getting red or grey Brahman cattle, a lot of Chardonnay cattle. They're not sure about black cattle. There's perceptions about lack of yield in the boning room. They're too fat. They feed them for the same number of days and then go over on fat. So there's an education piece up there that I think there's certainly opportunity for us as a company. It's been really good that other people haven't been as good as feeding them. We can push them harder. They're taking more implants easily. You can push the starch into them more without doing anything wrong, but than some of the other breeds. So there's some real opportunities, I think. And then then coming back down into southeast Queensland and into feedlots around how do these animals fit into sort of the modern world. So and then what bull goes back over their sisters. For us, it's pretty easy in our program, but I think for some producers are sort of scratching their head in North Australia, not really understanding the crossbreeding thing, or they've been in Chardonnay production or other breed production for so long that's been more terminal. And then I think if I put an Angus bull over my tropically adapted composite cattle or Brahman cattle in the north, then it's putting it out as a terminal, actually understanding the keeping the females and the rollover of those females into the herd was something that we learned with our station managers, and how many times we went through, they're going to become our next cows. They go, so where are we getting our heifers from next year? Because these ones are all black. They go, no, you're going to keep them. Like, they've got no horns, they fit in, this is our markets we're getting to. And that was a continual education process because they had 20 plus years of sort of thinking about another breed other than Brahman as a terminal, or other colours were spayed out. So for us as a company, what's that meant? Our age of turn off, including our cull cows, was 4.2 years. It's now down to 2 years in 10 years. Part of that's nutrition, but there's also genetics coming through in that. The kilos produced per hectare has gone up to 74%, which is pretty good. We still need to do better at that. We need to get our cattle heavier at leaving the property. We muck around with them too much. We haven't got probably the balance of finishing country, but we also put into our own feedlots and pick up weight up there. Kilos produced up. Brandings went, so we're at 51%, about 82% now. Our deaths have come down. Last year, in our feedlots, the composite cattle were $36 a head more profitable. That includes what we paid extra for them internally because they've got to compete against coming back down south. So every farm, every piece of CPC is its own profit centre. Diversity, but it has put a lot of complexity in. With increasing our productivity, from 2018 to 2022, we've dropped 300,000 tonnes of CO2 out of the business that we've been able to sell just from the cattle. And last year was about 200,000 tonnes, so we're just going through the final order to that. But as you know, the journey for going and making genetic change from when we started, so that's first year calf on the ground, we made decisions in 2014. It's out to 2028. Lucky we've got an owner who's now part of the team who's really committed and behind it and really excited. And every year we name the best bull after him, and that really helps. So, thank you.
Thanks very much, Troy. If the three of the speakers would like to come up on the stage and grab a seat. While they're coming up, just in your pack this afternoon, we've got a Angus for every system booklet. What we did there is took some of the best case studies that we've done through Northern Australia over the last 5 or 6 years. So there's some good reading there that's a bit easy to find, but deep in our website. So we've got a couple of roving mics up the back. I think Nancy and Noller might have those. And now is the time if you'd like to ask any questions of the speakers this afternoon. I've asked them before and nothing's really off limits. So yeah, we've got one down the front, Mel and Nancy, if you'd like to grab down the front to Richard here. Mic in the front row, thanks.
Wonderful presentations, thank you. Just two parts of my question. Firstly, Troy, you may have answered this on your last slide, but what's been the trend of your cost of production, particularly given you've had a significant increase in fertility? And secondly, longevity of Angus bulls in the north. Are you able to speak to what data you've collected and what trends you're seeing in that generally?
Good question. I can't bullshit because Ian's here who does benchmarking for us. So I think if you took inflation out of cost of production, we've certainly brought it down by increasing productivity and producing more kilos. But we still, on some of our properties, we're absolute leader in labour efficiency and cost, but others we're not. There's more that we can do there. But I think for us, the biggest driver is absolutely increasing productivity to bring down cost of production. We've got a bit of an issue with some of the maintenance costs in Northern Australia on our properties that make it, and supplements that give us a few issues that we're still going to keep working through. But if we made our cattle heavier, which Ian knows, particularly in Queensland, that would drive our P&L better. But we've got some country reliability issues and a few things. In terms of bull survivability, anywhere from a couple of minutes off the truck after buying them to, which we're all honest with ourselves have, through to 12 plus years. But We're probably getting 3 or 4 years out of pure Angus bulls in Northern Territory on average. That's because we push them pretty bloody hard. But the crossbred bulls are lasting as long as the Brahmins. It's really hard because they rub out their NLIS tags. Probably 20 to 30% we never see again. It's not that they go and die; they just can't get it back in. They go and get under a tree, and the chopper pilots find it really hard to get some of them out and moving. But it's not long enough to be honest in terms of how long they should last. I'd like to see that a bit better, but I don't have good enough data.
I'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll get it sent to you.
To no one in particular, all three. So some specifics on selecting for fertility. And not like, are you looking at days to calving, scrotal size? What are the specifics on selecting for fertility? Because all three of you touched on how, or spoke at length actually on how.
One of the reasons we went for more Angus cattle and Angus cattle in our composite program was because you had a days to calving EBV, and because of the scrotal size measurements and accuracy. So your days to calving was really important, scrotal circumference, and that's at the stud level, but also trawling through the physical information on breed plan and on society web pages and stuff to try and make sure we fully understand we've been picking something. But in the commercial herd, the first selection is done by the bull for fertility. They can pick fertility for heifer fertility and rebreed rate faster and quicker than we can at all. And the other one's morphology. So certainly do semen testing, but morphology is really important as well.
Thank you. Just a question for Richard. When you put up the, you had a bar graph there of the profitability for the different weaner yearling trade enterprises. The weaner one was the least profitable, but I'm just wondering whether there was an opportunity cost in that for running on the animals for the extra year to have them in a trade enterprise. Like obviously you're turning off weaners every year to have those trade cattle going through 18 months, 2 years. So is there an opportunity cost calculated into that?
Yes, I've understood you correctly. The weaner operations is breeding to sell weaners as opposed to a growing operation buying in. And we do see this typically, that's why sale weights have been profit drive. The weaner operations as a standalone business, but all the costs going into breeding that calf and the grass and everything else, and then selling it as a weaner and selling the growth potential there. So even with opportunity costs, those that are able to, it depends on where you are and how many kilos you can put on the year, as Troy said. If you're able to hold on to those animals for longer, then generally the whole system is more profitable because you get
Yeah, so is it time related? Is that holding on to them for longer?
Yeah, the growth.
You could have been running another cow and calf in their place. That's what I mean by the opportunity cost.
Yes, that does take that into account. It's looking at exactly the same grass eating for each. But that calf generally, they're growing weaner. Once you've got a weaner alive, it will generally convert grass into a lower cost than the weaner.
Can I sneak in one for Troy? Troy, you spoke about skin and then you spoke about hair. So in slicking our coats up, a lot of us are getting finer in the skin, but that fineness in skin I picked up is where you're getting the issues with the fly. So is it a slicker coat but a tougher skin? What's going to stop the flies?
It's a really good question, and it's really hard, and I'm not trying to be a smart ass by saying this, it's really hard to go and touch animals that have got, bleeding eyes or bumps and lumps on them out in the paddock at that time when they're getting that sort of buffalo fly hit to try and work that out. I think it is a bit of both, but I think that softer, the fly susceptibility is just overall, there's something that we don't understand there, and I know we've still got a baseline of Brahman cows that we're culling all the time and putting Angus bulls over in the stud, and we cull ruthlessly for skin lesions there, and we've been doing it for 10 years now. We're just sort of cracking it now that we don't have any issues. I don't think there's any difference in skin type. I think there's something there around susceptibility and bites and maybe behaviour that we just don't know, but you can select it out. And you can see it in our commercial herd where we have the biggest challenge. The manager there is really good on the heifers and selecting it out and older cows, and I don't think there's any difference in skin type. I think it's something that we don't understand, but we can select it out.
Thank you.
Going into the whole panel, but what are the assumptions on calf costs, bull calf, whatever the bull's costing, what's your calf cost per year? And for Ian, more specifically on the hybrid figure, take those gains are out of the first cross, what are your downstream assumptions and the dilution of that?
I'd have to look, Tom, to be honest, at the bull cost per calf data, but I know the hybrid figure. As you get more to a stable cross, then that benefit does go out. It's the first cross with a hybrid figure, and the longer it goes on, that's less. That's where the challenge is to maintain new genetics coming in to get that ongoing heterosis.
Well, so I'll just say the bull cost one again.
What's the calf with its bull cost? You know, it costs you $80,000 for average. What's your assumption of how many calves you get out of that bull? How much is it costing you?
For our commercial producers, yeah. Oh, look, it's varying, because we send bulls in a lot of different environments, I suppose. It's probably varying, but for me, you know, we've got that sale average, but we're also selling majority of our bulls are out of the paddock as well. A lot of bulls going out as yearlings. I know Troy said it doesn't work up in their operation, but we've got guys up in some of those operations that are control mating. So it's very hard to find a figure there with the variance that we're sending bulls into. For those guys sending them up as yearlings are basically, and where they have had some success with it, is sending them up and doing a tight control on their heifers, doing an 8 to 12 week joint on the heifers, pulling those bulls out, and then growing them out in that country for the 12 months and using them as their mature bulls. But in terms of the data across our business, I wouldn't have that off the top of my head.
Yeah, just on the yearling bulls, so our own bulls that we breed have to go out as certain yearling to 15, 16 months and work, or they go on a ship or go to a dinner or something. But the bulls that we bought, the yearling, they just needed a bit more extra time to acclimatise, and that's and to get body condition on and work. In terms of bull cost per calf, we join at about 3 to 4% in the real north, and then to be brutally honest, we still catch and drag out or take out about 400 bulls that come in from national parks and neighbours and stuff every year. So the bull rate percentage probably pushes up a bit higher. But if you look at that I suppose lets you look at the cost. We internally sell our bulls from the start to the commercial herds, and what the average of the commercial price is pretty much off what the rural press or Beef Central report at the end of the year, and then we're doing a little bit more on ABV, so you can work out the internal charge. The stations are paying a commercial rate internally for it.
Any other questions from the panel? It's a good crowd, really. Guys, thank you very much. If you've got a last one, put your hand up. Otherwise, thank you for attending this afternoon. Thank you all for speaking and being so free with your information and your time. This afternoon, we've got drinks at the Angus Australia stand from 4 to 6. You'll be all very welcome to come along. We've got the whole team of Angus Australia staff. Any questions that you've got, our directors are here, quite a few of the directors, so please come along, say hello, and thank you for attending this afternoon.